Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Live2D PNGTuber rigging tutorial. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, links for those will be in the description. In the last two videos, we set up our eye blink, mouth rig, hair movement, and physics setup. Today, we will be working on animations and expressions. If you don't plan on using any animations or expressions on your model, you can go ahead and skip to part 4, which goes over the exporting and VtubeStudio setup process. Let's go ahead and get started. So unfortunately, I do not have unlimited time and I can't show you how to do every single possible expression on your model, but what I can do is show you a couple of them so that you get an idea / a feel for how expressions work in Live2D. For our sample expressions today, we're going to be doing angry, heart eyes, star eyes, and also a confused spiral eyes. A couple of these are going to have an idle animation that runs in the background so that it will have a little bit of movement to it when you toggle them on. And so that will require us to open up the animation menu, and we'll let you get comfortable with that and learn how to export motion files. But first things first, we have to have our art mesh ready to go. As you can see on my project file, I do have some expressions here. So if you don't have your expression art mesh ready to go, you can always add it in later. So what you can do is take a Photoshop document that has the same dimensions, so 600 by 600 in our case, and you can just drag and drop that in, and it will give you a prompt asking if you want to make a new model or update the current model, and we want to keep our current model, obviously. We're going to click on that, and then it's going to give you three options. You can replace the mesh, you can register the document without adding any of the layers as art mesh, or you can add the new layers as art mesh, and that's what I'm going to do. Hit OK, and it added these new layers down here, which are invisible. Let me toggle them on for you. So it added all of these guys in, and I can start using these as art mesh. So really quick, just since we're on the topic of file importing, I also wanted to show you what you can do in the case that you want to update any of your model's textures, or if you need to change something out or add something new. All you have to do is add in the new files. So in this case, I'm going to be adding our expression layers, which, as you remember, I already imported these, but I'm just doing this for the sake of doing it, so you know how to do this if this is how you need to go about doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and paste these layers into my expressions folder. Again, I already have them, but I'm just doing this so that you can see. So they're there. And another thing I wanted to do is change my darken box. My darken box was previously named layer 1. I'm changing it to darken box new just to rename it. And I'm going to hit Control U, and I'm just going to change the luminosity a little bit and increase the saturation, maybe just for fun, make it dark blue or something like that, and hit OK. And then don't forget to hit Control Save or Control S, and then we can re-import this. For the sake of not having copies of everything, I'm just going to delete this previous import that I had. Don't need that anymore. Please mind my messy folder, but I'm just going to take my PNGTuber model and drag and drop it in here. Again, it gives you this prompt. I don't want to make a new model. I want to update this one. So I'm going to click on my model. And now it's giving me this option to add layers as new art mesh, register without adding art mesh, or replace. We're going to replace the original file. So I have two PSD files in here. The one that has just my expressions and then the original one. I'm trying to update the original one. So I'm going to select that and hit OK. And now it's updated everything. As you can see, darken box new, it didn't actually update. It made a new art mesh. And that's because the layer name didn't actually match, because my darken box was originally called something else. So it actually just generated a new art mesh. But let's say, for example, we drag and drop our Photoshop document in and it doesn't update. And we're like, what do? I already rigged this art mesh. I just want to update it. What you'll do is you'll go to the project menu, go to the source image section, and go to this replacement. You can see layer 1 is the original. And then if you go to the updated one, now I have darken box new, right? So if you want to update the original one to have the texture of the new one, sorry if that doesn't make sense, I'm going to select the one that I actually have rigged. See how there's keyforms here? This one is actually rigged. This is the new one, no keyforms. The old one that I already have rigged, I want to update. So I'm going to select the texture from the updated file, right click, and set as input image for model image of selected art mesh. Jesus, that's a mouthful. Anyway, it will then update the texture for the item that you already have rigged. So if you go to update your project file and the art mesh makes a new art mesh because it doesn't recognize what the old one was and how to replace it properly. It does that all the time, by the way. That's how you do it. That's how you fix it. I'm going to also do a tiny bit of organizing. Live2D does have a folder function for parameters, but these folders are not shown in VtubeStudio. So if you want, you can add these dummy variables that I'm going to add here, and they serve as kind of like a divider for you to be able to see what's going on better when you're working in VtubeStudio. I recommend this, but it's not required. Okay, and now that I have this organization done, I'm going to add in all of our parameters that will be used to control our toggles. These are all going to be from 0 to 1 with a default of 0. Okay, and that will do it for our parameter setup. Now it's time to start rigging, so let's start with our angry toggle. I'm going to turn my voice volume on so I can see everything better. We don't need to generate a mesh for this angry art asset, it's just going to be deformed in a pretty generic way. So let's select our angry pulse parameter and add 3 keyforms. On the right, we're going to be holding Alt-Shift and making it slightly larger. And on the left, we're going to hold Alt-Shift and make it slightly smaller. And now we're going to add a warp deformer. And we're going to name this Angry Expression. With that warp deformer selected, make it active on the Angry Expression parameter, add 2 keyforms, and at 0, we're going to toggle this to 0% opacity, and on the right, it'll stay at 100. We can also tilt our brows down to make them look angry, so let's select our brow art mesh. If your brow art mesh is not separated into 2 separate entities like mine are right now, you will need to edit your art mesh manually to make sure that they are separated. To do that, you will select the manual art mesh editing button here, select your eraser button and erase all of the current mesh, then select the mesh pen and add vertices around the eyebrows. This doesn't have to be perfect. When you're done adding a circle around these 2, you can hit the auto connect button, which will connect both of the 2 entities. We will have to go back with our eraser tool. Just like with the brush tool, you can hold B and left click and drag to change the size of the eraser. And we're just going to erase all of these connecting lines and then hit the blue check mark. We're going to, with our brows selected, make them active on our angry expression parameter. And at +1, we're going to left click and drag to select the vertices for the right eyebrow, hold left click and rotate the brow, move it out just slightly and slightly down. Then we'll do the same for the left brow. And that looks pretty good to me. Now let's work on our heart expression. So make your heart art mesh active. This one will need a slightly better mesh, so I'm going to use our auto mesh button and select the standard deformation option. If you would like this to look a little bit less choppy, you can set it to heavy deformation, or you can also go into the manual mesh editing button and select 4 division to give it a bunch more vertices. In general, 4 division is terrible. Don't use 4 division, but this is not going to need to be super optimized since it's such a small model. I'm going to leave mine on heavy deformation. Then I'm going to make a new deformer. This is going to be called Heart Bounce. I'm going to make it active on Heart Bounce 1 with 3 keyforms. On the right side, I'm going to again do the squash and stretch method. So I'm going to hold Alt, left click and drag, Alt, left click and drag, move to the left keyform, Alt, left click and drag, Alt, left click and drag. So we have our little bounce movement. Then I'm going to make this active on Heart Bounce 2 as well with 3 keyforms. Make sure that you are in the center keyform for Heart Bounce 1 as you start your work on Heart Bounce 2 and move to the right. We're going to take our brush tool and we're going to hold Shift and move the whole thing over to the right, push from the center. On the right side, we're going to hold Shift and push back to the left a little bit. And on the left, we can drag to the left a tiny bit. And this will give a rotating look. Then we can actually use this hamburger menu here and select reflect motion and reflect the motion horizontally And when we move to the left, it will reflect the exact same motion backwards. In Live2D, regular parameters are multiplicative, which means that if you have two sets of parameters, each with 3 keyforms, the total amount of keyforms required for that set of parameters is going to be 3 by 3, which is 9. And that's because there are something called corners. You can link these two parameters up to see the interaction between them. And this doesn't look that great, and that's because we haven't generated our corners. The corners are these 4 points at the edge here, and basically what's happening is we haven't told these two parameters how to interact. So we know when heart bounce 2 is at the middle, what happens? We bounce up and down. And when heart bounce 1 is at the middle, we know heart bounce 2 moves side to side like this. But what happens to heart bounce 2 when heart bounce 1 is at positive 1? Well, we haven't told it how to interact yet. One simple way of knocking this out is to press Ctrl 4, and that will bring up our synthesize corners menu, and we can choose to synthesize the corners between heart bounce 1 and heart bounce 2. Leave the settings as default and hit OK. It will set everything back to default, so let's make sure to turn our voice volume back on so we can see better. And now we should have corners generated. And this looks pretty good to me. In Live2D now we have something called Blendshapes, which we used previously with the hair rigging. And Blendshapes are additive instead of multiplicative, which means that it generates corners automatically in a way. Sometimes that can lead to unexpected results. In the case of hair rigging physics, it's usually an excellent choice, and that's why I prioritize using our 2 Blendshapes slots for hair rigging only. So in a perfect world, I probably would have rigged these also on Blendshapes parameters because these don't need to have a perfect shape and would greatly benefit from not having to generate corners. But the plus side is that now you know how to generate corners, so it'll be a good tool for you to use in the future. Now for our heartbeat parameter, we can select our heart art mesh and add 3 keyforms, and this is just going to increase and decrease in size. So let's move to the right, hit the A button, Alt Shift and drag out, and move to the left and Alt Shift and drag in. Now we have a heart beat as well. And lastly, we'll select our heart bounce warp deformer, add another warp deformer on top of that, and name this heart expression, and we'll make this active on our heart eyes expression parameter. Add 2 keyforms. On the right it will be at 100, and on the left it will be at 0. However, we have not added our heart eyes quite yet, so let's add those in. Select your heart art mesh, hold Control, and select your heart bounce warp deformer, and press Control C, Control V. Now we'll have a second copy. The problem is that if we want to move this and resize it to be in front of our iris, when we change our heart bounce parameters, it's rigged for every single movement with respect to this original position up here. So that's actually not the best way that we can adjust things. We would have to manually go through and change everything to match. So instead we can just add a warp deformer on top of this. Don't even worry about the name. Hit create, and we will use this warp deformer to move and resize the heart. So let's click and drag, hold Shift and Alt to make it smaller, and center it above the iris. And now you'll see our movement is still the same that it once was. It's just been resized and moved slightly. I'm going to rename this to Heart Iris R, and then I'm going to hold Control, select Heart Iris R, Heart Bounce, and the Warp Deformer for adjustment, and press Control C, Control V. Then I'm going to select our Adjustment Warp Deformer and hold Shift and drag this over to the other eye, hold Shift Alt, and make it slightly smaller. I'm also going to rename this one to Heart Iris L, and then we can hold Control and select both of the Heart Bounce warp deformers and drag them out of those dummy deformers that we used to resize them. And then we can hold Control, select the 2 dummy deformers, and delete them so that there is less clutter. We also need to make sure that this expression works with our eye blink. As you can see, at the moment, when we close our eyes, these heart pupils are still visible. So we will have to rig these to adjust for them. So I'm going to take my Heart Iris L, and I'm going to make it active on IL open. Then I'm going to select our 0.3 keyform, make it active there as well. And at the 0.29 keyform, we're going to make it active and change the opacity to 0. Now at this point in time, because this is already rigged on our heartbeat parameter down here as well, we'll have to make sure to also make sure that the right position is set to 0 and the left position is also set to 0. And then after we do that, we can add our last keyform at the 0 point in IL open, and these keyforms should maintain the same 0% opacity for all 3 keyforms in heartbeat. So now let's do the same for our right eye. And there we go. We also need to make sure that this expression works with our eye blink. As you can see, I imported these layers at a later point, and so in the case for the assets for the eyes, these are actually currently above the bangs, so I need to move these down to be with the eye layers, so I'm going to drag them and drop them down here. Let's continue with the next expression, which is going to be our star eyes. So let's make our star active. And you can either make a custom mesh for this or use a heavier mesh. We're going to be deforming the edges of this, so we need a little bit more of a refined mesh for this case. I'm going to set it to heavy deformation. Honestly, that doesn't look good to me, so I'm going to do mine manually. To do that, you'll select this button up here again. Let's erase our original points. We're going to use the pen tool and add in some new ones. Add one in the center, and then I'll hit auto connect and it will add these extra lines on the exterior. So I'm going to use the eraser tool to get rid of those. And that looks good to me, so I'm going to hit the blue check. Now select your sparkle shine parameter and add 3 keyforms. On the right, we're going to use a new tool. This is the brush selection tool. We're going to use this to select the exterior vertices on the star on the right and left side. So hold left click and drag, and then hold the shift button to add an additional selection. And we're going to do the same on the left hand side. And then switch to your cursor by pressing A. And we're going to hold Alt and drag these out. Then use your brush selection tool again, select the top, hold shift, select the bottom, press A and Alt, drag in. And then we can use our brush tool to get a little bit of a refinement down here. We can also grab individual vertices and pull them down for the smoothest movement. And then let's move to the left-hand side, brush selection tool. Let's grab the right and left again, hit A, and these are going to pull in this time. I'm going to select a few vertices and adjust them a tad. There's actually extra, let me adjust this mesh. I don't need these extra lines here, they're just causing problems. And I'm going to correct this just a little bit. My brush tool, use my brush selection, select the top and bottom, hit A and drag out, and again do a tiny bit of correction. And this is the resulting star movement. Now let's Control C, Control V. And once again, we don't want this to affect our rigging. Thankfully, this time it has actually done something where if the original mesh that you're working with has rigging on it and you copy and paste it, it will give you one of those deformers that you can use for adjusting automatically. It gives you a rotation deformer specifically, so we can just use this instead of having to make a new deformer to adjust it. So let's move this down, maybe out here, and I'm going to adjust the scale, maybe a little bit bigger. Perfect. And again, it will follow the same rigging as the previous star. It will just be in a different location. Then we can select our deformer of position adjustment, hold Control and select the star and hit copy, paste. And let's adjust this one as well. I'm gonna move it over here and make it even smaller, and then copy and paste again. This is going to be for our pupil, copy and paste again. And this one will be for our other pupil. Now let's rename these. And we can also hold Control to select all of our new stars and drag them out of that adjustment deformer, then select all of our adjustment deformers and get rid of these. And now we should have all of these stars that are rigged in the same way. But we do want to have a little bit of a mix up here, so maybe we want our eyes to have a slightly different movement. Maybe one of the stars can even have a slightly different movement as well. So let's select our new star and our 2 star pupils. We're going to right click on Sparkle Shine and click on Change. And we're going to change to Sparkle Shine 2 and hit OK. And now this will have the same rigging. It will just be moved to a different parameter. So Sparkle Shine 1 moves these 2 stars and Sparkle Shine 2 moves these 3 stars. However, we want the movement to be inverted so that when this one squishes down, this one stretches up. So let's move to the rightmost parameter, right click, and hit reflect. And now the movement will be inverted. Let's also take our star pupil R. With your star pupil R selected, let's go to our IR open, add a keyform at 0.3, add a keyform at 0.29 and change the opacity to 0, and make sure that both the right and the left sides are also set to 0, and then add a keyform at 0. And these should automatically pull the same opacity. And now let's correct our left pupil as well. And lastly, we can select our star and hold shift to select all of the star assets, add a warp deformer and name this Starry Eyes, hit create, and make this active on our Starry Eyes parameter with 2 keyforms, and toggle the 0 point to 0% opacity. And if you're in a situation like mine, once again, drag the new pupil assets down to be with your eyes so that they stay behind your bang assets. Lastly, in terms of our emotional expression toggles, we're going to do our spiral toggle. So let's make that active. And these are only going to be present on the eyes. So let's drag this down to the eye, and I'm going to hold Alt Shift to make it slightly smaller and center it around the eye. This is going to be rigged on a rotation deformer, so this is going to be the first time we will be using a rotation deformer. So let's select our rotation deformer button up here and create a new one. I'm going to name this Dizzy Spin and hit create, and it should center it in the center of your art mesh. If it doesn't, you can change the center of rotation by holding Control and dragging, and that will change the point of rotation to wherever the rotation deformer is now existing. In addition to that, you can also hold Control and adjust the radius of the circle, as well as hold Alt and change the arm length. I'm going to make this rotation deformer active on our spin cycle with 2 keyforms. And the left keyform will have an angle of 0, and the right keyform will have an angle of 360 degrees, such that you will go in a full circle by the end of the parameter. Now we're going to right-click this parameter, hit Edit Parameter, and change this to a repeat parameter. And I'm getting all these free warning pop-ups, just ignore them. We're only using 1 repeat parameter. But now when you left-click and drag across the parameter, it will continuously spin forever. Now let's hold Control to select our spin cycle and our spiral, hold Control-C, Control-V, and you'll get a copy of the art asset, the spin cycle rotation deformer, and a new rotation deformer for adjustment. So we can go ahead and select that one and move it over to the left eye and scale it down just a tad so it fits in better. And this will follow the same spin cycle. Now all we have to do is left click and drag that out of the adjustment deformer and delete the adjustment deformer. Let's also do our eye correction again. So this is the right pupil. So I'm going to go to IR open, add a keyform, go to 0.29, add a keyform, change the opacity to 0, and then at 0, add a new keyform, and then I'll do the same for the left pupil. And there we go. Now I can hold Control and select both Dizzy spin cycles and add a new rotation deformer for a Dizzy expression. And I'm going to make this active on our Dizzy expression parameter and change the opacity to 0 at 0. And I also will have to move these down with my eyes as well. Lastly, I'm going to show you how to make a simple opacity parameter as well. So we can take our hair bounce parameter. This parameter, if you remember, has all of our hair components in it. And I'm going to make a new warp deformer on top of that and name this bald toggle. And hit create. I'm going to make this active with 2 keyforms on our bald parameter. And at 0, we'll leave it at 100%. And at 1, we will change the opacity for the hair to 0 and drag up slightly to make it look like your wig is being snatched. This same method can be applied to pretty much anything. So let's say, for example, I'm going to replicate this parameter, edit it, and make this jacket. And then I'm going to select my jacket and make it active with 2 keyforms. Up here, I'll pull it up and change the opacity to 0. And now I've got a simple parameter for removing my jacket. And now let's take all of our new expression deformers. And now if we go to modeling, physics settings, we should be able to activate an expression and have it function with the same bounce movement that we already have set up. So if we add in our heart eyes, for example, it will move with the main model bounce. There is, however, one issue that we're going to start having. So if we toggle on our Starry Eyes, for example, and turn down our voice volume, you'll notice that the darken box is not clipped to the star that is outside of the bounds of our model. So in most situations you would think, this is fine, I'll just take our darken box and I will add all of my expressions to the clipping for this. The problem with this though is that when we toggle off the starry eyes and turn our voice volume down, our darken box is unfortunately still showing even though the object is invisible. There are a ton of ways that you can go about fixing this. For example, we can make a new darken box that is only clipped to the starry eyes and rig that darken box on starry eyes, and then that would reuse the same texture so we wouldn't have to worry about adding another big box to our texture atlas or anything like that. The way that I think I'm going to go about it is I'm going to move the expression out of the way when the avatar is not speaking. And so in our situation, we have this long blend for the opacity of darken box, and I need there to be a more refined point at which we can switch out this object and make it go away. So I am going to quickly adjust the rig for darken box on voice volume. So this is 83 here. So at the 0.49 keyframe, I'm going to also make it 83. And then at 0.5, I'm going to change this to be 0% so that the opacity change happens right here in the middle. Then I'm going to take the star that I know pops out of place. So I'm going to right click, object at cursor, and select my star. And this star already has some rigging on it down here. So I'm going to make a new warp deformer for it. And I'm just going to name this darken box fix. And I'm going to rig it for voice volume. So at +1, I'm going to add a keyform. The voice is speaking, so darken box is not visible. And once again at 0.5, the same case. Then at 0.49, this is where the opacity change happens and it's been darkened, and now we can see the outline of an expression that's not currently active. So I'm just going to hold shift and drag it behind the head. And then really quick, I'm also going to make sure that the parameters attached to this don't make it show either. So I think this is far enough to where you can't see it. And then I'm going to add another keyform at 0. So now it moves out of the way. The problem is that now if our starry eyes expression is active, it's been moved over. So we will also have to adjust this. So let's move back to the correct positioning at voice volume +1 and also make this correction active on starry eyes with 2 keyforms. So it's okay here. It's okay here at 0.5 for voice volume. And at the 0.49 mark, this is the point at which it moves back to the position that we actually don't want. We want this to be in its correct spot while it's visible while the voice volume is toggled down. Sorry, this is a little bit complicated. There's a command that you can usually use in the Pro version. It's Control-Shift-C and Control-Shift-V. So it's basically a copy and paste with shift added in there. And what that does is it copies and pastes the form, which is the location, opacity, and any other applicable things like multiplier, screen color. And it copies all that information to a different keyform. We don't have access to that in the free version, so if you are in the Pro version, feel free to just correct this by using that method. We don't have that in this situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our voice volume 0.5. We're going to use this button down here to take a screenshot of what's happening. And it should toggle on the visible screenshot button. Then we're going to move to the 0.49 point, and this is where we moved our star back over, and we're going to move it back over manually and just try to line it up as best as we can to the screenshot of the previous keyform. And the same for voice volume 0. And then we can toggle this off by pressing this button again. And you can tell that it's shifting slightly, but sadly because we don't have access to that control paste form option, yeah, it's just a little bit more tedious for us, sadly. But now if we toggle down our starry eyes, there is no ghost star hanging out over here in the shadow, and if we toggle it on, it is fixed. Now here's another thing that's very annoying. This does not look ideal because it looks like it's moving out really quickly. And I personally don't like that, so I'm going to fix that as well. So I'm going to move slightly forward from 0 on the starry eyes toggle. I'm going to add a keyform here. On this keyform, I want it to be immediately in the correct position, so back over here. So I'm once again going to take a screenshot, move to this keyform, and move this over to align it, so that the alignment happens instantaneously. and then we don't have to view that. Now we have to make sure that it's also good to go for voice volume 0.5. So let's take a screenshot, move back to 0.1 and drag it over. And now we should be all set. So let's just check them together. If we move these really fast, it should look like it's flashing and you shouldn't see any movement between the two. I know this is a little bit more complicated than you probably wanted it to be, but that's the unfortunate situation that comes from using the free version because Live2D is low-key an evil company. That's a whole separate conversation that we'll have to have at some point. But now we will unfortunately have to do the same thing for our heartbeat. So let's get our heart, which is not visible right now, but if we increase our heartbeat size, you can see it in the background very, very minimally. I mean, one option is to just make it not go this big, and that will save you from having to do the really annoying process that we just did. But I'm gonna go ahead and show you again, just in the case that you absolutely have to do this. So once again, let's make a new deformer. We'll name this darken box fix, and darken box fix needs to be active on voice volume. I'm going to keep heartbeat toggled up, by the way, so I can see what's happening here. So at the 0.5 mark, it's fine. When the shadow comes in, we don't like that, so we're going to shift it to the left and then activate it on voice volume at 0. And then we'll have to fix that for when heart eyes is toggled on because now it is in the wrong position. So let's rig it for 2 keyforms for heart eyes. On the right hand side, let's take a photo of that and then go to our 0.49 keyform and shift it over, try and align it as best as we can, and do the same for the 0 point on voice volume. And now it does this shifting thing when you turn heart eyes back off, which we obviously don't want. So we're going to move up to 0.1 and we're going to move this back over so that the movement adjustment happens immediately. And do the same over here. And then to check that everything looks good, we can remove this screenshot option and drag our voice volume up to heart eyes, epilepsy warning, and then we can go ahead and check to make sure that this doesn't have any strange movement happening when we flash between the expression, and it's looking pretty good to me. So I think we're all set now. None of my other expressions go out of the bounds. Again, this is completely avoidable if you have the Pro version because then you can use the Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V copy and paste form hotkey. That helps a lot, and you also will have access to the multiply and screen color, which completely circumvents the whole concept of the darken box at all, so you wouldn't have to use that. You would literally just darken the art mesh. It's way easier that way, but I understand not everybody has access to paying for this service, and also not everybody still has their free trials, and so I just wanted to provide this as an option for you. Hopefully you don't have to do that though, because it's certainly not fun. With all that said and done, now it's time to add our last physics group. There's only 2 physics groups for the entire video. One is going to control all of your hair and the main bounce and all that. The other one's just going to be for the heart beating. So let's go to our physics menu, and I am going to turn on my voice volume so I can see what's going on. I'm going to hit add to add a new physics group, and I'm going to name this heart bounce. Ignore the presets and hit OK. Then we're going to add a new input, and for the input, we're going to select heartbeat, set it to 100, position. We're going to add 2 pendulums, and then move to our output, right click and add, and I'm going to add heart bounce 1 and heart bounce 2. And so now if we move our heartbeat, well, you can't see it right now because the expression is turned off. Let's turn our expression on. Now if we move heartbeat, you can see the heart has a nice little movement like that. However, it's obviously only functioning when we move the heartbeat slider. We're not going to be moving the heartbeat slider because this is not a tracking input or attached to anything else. So let's go up here from our physics group and move back to our voice volume bounce. We're going to add heartbeat as an output for our original physics group. So now what's happening is the original physics group will get voice volume data. It will output to the initial group, which is going to be the hair and the main bounce and all of that. And then it sends data out to heartbeat physics group. We'll take that slightly delayed physics input and output it into the bounce. So now when we talk with voice volume, the heart will have a slight delay, and obviously the physics are going a little bit crazy. So let's adjust those a bit. And then I do think it actually is getting a little bit too much from the other physics group, so let's check that real fast, see what's going on in here. And yeah, as you can tell, heartbeat is actually getting way more than everything else is getting. It's getting 155% output. So I want these ones to stay the same. I'm just going to hold left click and drag to the left, and it will pull down the input. Let's put it maybe 0.77 and see where that's looking. Toggle this back on. It's looking a little bit better, but it's still getting so much. Let's pull this back down to where it's staying under 100 is ideal. There we go. Okay, everything seems to be all right. So let's move on to our animation now. Go to File, New, Animation, or Control-Shift-N and hit OK. And it will make a new scene, and it will have all of our assets from our current project listed. Down here is and let me turn off input for just a moment. You won't really need to be looking at this, but this is our frame size and our FPS and all of that stuff. In general, you should be animating at whatever FPS you intend to keep VtubeStudio open at. So for me, it's 60, so I'm going to switch this to 60 real fast. And the actual frame size doesn't matter in our case. We're just animating for the purpose of exporting to a JSON file. And so it doesn't really matter the size of the frame because we're not exporting to video. But just for the sake of consistency, I'm just going to change it to 1920 by 1080 just so I can look at a nice 1920 canvas. In addition to that, I'm also going to change this. We're going to name this our idle animation. And now what we can do is we can take our model from up here, hold left click, and drag it onto the frame. Resizing doesn't really matter because again, we're not exporting for video or anything, but I am going to hold Shift Alt just to make it bigger so I can see what's going on better. And now we can start our animation. So let's pull this down a little bit so we can see the timeline better. And mine is currently set to 1 second and 42 frames. So I'm going to adjust the length to be exactly 2 seconds, 0 frames. Then I'm going to pull my work area out to match that. And I'm also going to pull out the model. This is the time that the model is on screen. So you can tell over here, on screen, on screen, on screen, and then past the blue bar, it turns off screen. So we do have to pull this asset over so that we can see it the entirety of the animation length. Then I'm going to pull the bar back in so I can see the timeline better. So it's mostly fit to my screen. Now, for the sake of seeing things better, I'm going to temporarily turn on our voice volume just so I can see everything nice and bright. We'll turn off this keyform later because if we leave it on, then the idle animation would keep our voice volume on in perpetuity, which we don't want. That being said, one of the things that we are going to be animating is going to be our sparkle eyes, so I'm going to turn that on really quick. And our sparkle eyes are going to be animated with sparkle shine. For sparkle shine, let's start with sparkle shine 1, and we'll start in the middle, move over like let's say 20 frames. We're going to go to the right, move over 20 frames, back to the middle, move over 20 frames to the left, and then from that point on it's going to go back to the middle and then repeat. So we're going to left click and drag, Control C, move over to the next 20 keyframe interval, Control V to paste. Right now we're looking at middle to right to middle to left, back to the middle, back right to the middle, and then it should complete this full loop. So in a perfect world, it should go back to the left and then back to the middle again, so that when we start back over, it's a perfect loop. This is outside of our frame. So one thing that you can do is you can left click and drag and hit this adjust spacing interval and change the amount of spacing by a percentage. In other software, you can hold Alt or Option or something like that and just drag it and it will change the interval. That we don't have that in Live2D. We don't have nice things. We have this percentage thing. So you kind of just have to tinker with it. 85 is almost perfect. So I'm going to undo that and try like maybe 87. And that's like actually, I think, kind of perfect. Sometimes if you do the math very well, like if you keep things on pretty even intervals, you know, by every 20 frames, it helps do this math later on, because then you can be like, if I need one more, then I need to add another 20 frames, which means that, you know, if I did 50% of that, you know, then everything would be cut down by 10 frames. Obviously, only if you're a math person does that apply, but anyhow. So in my case, the 87% is perfect. This is what we're looking like right now. And if you pay attention, it does have this kind of easing in and easing out property to it. And that's because by default, Live2D, the dope sheet for movement is non-linear. So that means that things are moving with like an acceleration to them rather than just moving at a certain pace. So it'll speed up or slow down instead of just moving at a constant velocity. So we can see this in action by if we select everything here and we just change all of these keyforms to linear. Hey, I said all of the keyforms. Linear. Okay. This is what it looks like when it's linear. Bop, 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 bop. There's no easing in or easing out. And in addition, there's also the other option of having, if you do steps, then it won't actually ease at all. It will just flash between them. So it will look frame by frame animated, which is pretty cool. It's a very cool look. I'm just going to keep the auto Bezier, let it do its smooth thing, but feel free to use the other two options as well. By the way, don't forget to hit Control S and save really quick. Why do I always embarrass myself with what folder I have open? Save your animation file somewhere so you can find it later. I'm just going to name it idle animation. So now let's toggle our angry expression on. We're just going to have this angry pulse pop up and back. And so for that reason, we can literally just left click, select all of our sparkle shine keyforms, Control C, and then we're going to go up to our angry pulse. And this is going to work exclusively because these are both a parameter that goes from -1 to +1. So you can actually just paste this set of keyforms over here. So to do that, it's not just regular Control V, unfortunately. You can't just select this and press Control V. It will paste into the same parameter. So we're going to have to select the bar. So hold left click and drag all the way to the end of angry pulse, and then right click, paste keyframes to selected rows. And that will actually do the work for you. And now it should function exactly on the same motion as the sparkle shine is. Go ahead and again, delete the keyframe for angry so that it's not controlling our model at all. The last thing that we have to do is going to be the eye spin cycle. So let's toggle our dizzy on. And this one is going to be a little bit different because this is on a repeat parameter. So obviously with the repeat parameter, we're going to start with 0. And I don't know how fast I want this to spin. So let's just move to maybe half a second, and we're going to move to the end and right click. So this will give it the mark of 360. You'll notice that it moves back to the beginning again. It's because it's a repeat parameter. So then if we move to the 1 second mark here, if we right click again on the end parameter, now it's going to be at 720. And again, it cycles back to the beginning. Just make sure that this is always going up by an increment of the entire cycle, because if you don't do that, you'll start to get some strange results. Because if you're not paying attention, you might accidentally key in like a 360 after the 720 or something like that. And then it will actually turn around and go backwards. So just make sure that you are exclusively going forwards. So let's move to 130. We're at the 1080 mark now, and forward again, 1440. And now it should continuously spin forever. There is actually one last thing that we need to do. So we need to take our sparkle eyes, turn it back on, and we're going to paste sparkle shine 1 into sparkle shine 2. So again, hold left click and drag, Control C. Then hold left click and drag into the next parameter, right click, paste keyforms to selected rows, and now they're going to be just slightly different. So when this one goes up, this one goes down, which adds just a little bit of visual interest as opposed to them obviously having the same exact movement. So now let's make sure that we clear everything else off the timeline. The only things that should be visible on the timeline should be your eye spin cycle, your angry pulse, and then your 2 sparkle shine movements. Everything else is going to be on physics. So let's go ahead and hit Control S to save, and we're all done. Good work, you now have your expressions and idle animation ready to go. In the next video, we will be going over setting up our texture atlas, exporting, and setting up the model in VtubeStudio. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!